Good afternoon, and welcome to the Committee of Whole meeting on Monday, January 25th. We have all of our council present, as well as our two student councillors, Carter Hughes and Sarah Lagarde. So welcome, everyone. Are there any amendments to the agenda this evening? I think the Clerk Bennett has one.
With council's permission, we'd just like to move the in-camera discussion down on the agenda following the priority issues.
I see nodding heads. That sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any disclosure of monetary interest? There's no delegations this evening. I do need a motion to adopt the minutes of Monday, January 11th, 2021, Committee of the Whole, and Monday, January 18th, 2021, Special Committee of the Whole meeting. A motion to move by Councillor Dwyer and seconded by Councillor Brennan. All in favor? Thank you. I understand we have a few reports this evening that are important. So I'm going to start with Director Manhire, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a few quick reports. We did get the outdoor rink opened up on Friday. Had some tremendous use over the weekend, so we look to continue that as long as the weather cooperates with us. We do ask people to use it for public skating. I saw Councillor Allen out there with your grandchild as one of the first skaters.
Yeah, it's first time on skates, so it didn't go so well.
So that's going to continue as long as we can function with that. And a reminder that hockey is or sports are actually restricted under the current lockdown, so we will not be able to do those, but we will be keeping an eye on what the legislation says for us. The emergency childcare was closed as of Friday, and the daycare and before and after school programs opened up today at St. Francis and the other locations. So we will be accommodating more children in those programs. And then finally, we have met with the consultants for the Parks and Recreation Master Plan. We've provided them with a number of documents, everything from council strategic priorities to the service reviews and some of the other guiding documents are OP. We are designing a timeline for consultations as well as for the process. And we will look at having the group in, once we've defined that, we'll have the group in to address council to let you know what our timeline is and where the opportunities are going to be for council as well as the general public to give feedback to the process. We hope to be doing that by the end of February, third week.
Any questions for Director Manhire? No, that's good news, Director Manhire. Thanks for that. Next up, can we have the Chief Cheeseborough?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Emergency Control Group met last week, and I'll give you a quick update on some of the items that we covered. Lanark-Leeds Grenville was one of the 7 health unit areas in the province that had been granted approval for children to return to school today. There was only 7 out of 32 health units that were permitted. Unfortunately, we were one of them. There's more active screening being put in place and the increased mask use for younger children. Dr. Stewart had stated that the current case numbers in Lanark-Leeds Grenville places us back in the green zone if we're going by the numbers. The vaccine plan that was in place is uncertain at this point due to the supply problem that Pfizer is experiencing. Immunization will still continue, but it'll be in the long-term care, but it does not include staff until the supplies improve. They will start planning larger community rollout in mid-March to be prepared when there's ample vaccine available. It is not known if the vaccine will prevent the transmission. The health professionals are currently reviewing the numbers and the studies to see if it actually does help stop that transmission. Personal protective equipment is still going to be required. Mass vaccination is the key to bringing it under control. There are a number of workplace outbreaks still on the go, and the Ministry of Labor has attributed those to lunchroom and break rooms is where the transmission is taking place. Resources about preventing the workplace spread are on the Ministry of Labor website. And you will hear later tonight that virtual meetings report will be coming to council tonight with regards to face-to-face presentations. The stay-at-home order impacts also on the in-person meeting within the municipal buildings. As Director Manhire indicated, the rink has opened. The hours are 8 a.m. till 8 p.m. And plans will be put in place for the weekend activities. Also, as Director Manhire indicated, no hockey is permitted, but masks will be required, and there is a capacity to 25 people. Signage being developed and messaging rules will be widely shared. And the messaging that we put forth needs to reflect that the stay-at-home orders remain in place during the return to school. There's lots of information on the Lanark Leeds Grenville Health Unit site, including a video concerning the vaccines. Although we're slowly seeing a decline in this area, and Dr. Stewart and the health unit emphasize that what we're doing in Smith Falls is what should be done, and that is helping keep the numbers down. And it's certainly hope that the general public continues to follow the guidelines and the rules for that, so we can get beyond this and hopefully remove some more of the restrictions. That is my update for this evening.
Thank you, Chief. I don't see any questions. Next up would be Economic Development Manager Jennifer Miller, please.
Thank you, Chair. So as the stay-at-home order continues, we've been working really closely with our partners to continue to support our small business community. We're encouraging all local business owners to apply for the province's small business grant and also to visit our website for a full list of support programs that are currently available. So a few of those things that we're doing is we have partnered with the Chamber of Commerce to bring We Shop Local to Smith Falls. We Shop Local is a convenient, safe, and central online e-commerce marketplace. It's built to promote the businesses within our community. So the online marketplace hosts our local retailers' websites, making it easy for the Chamber and the town to promote online shopping options in Smith Falls. So this site will go live on Friday, and interested businesses are asked to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce to be included. There's no cost to businesses for this program. We're also proud to launch our latest microeconomic injection marketing effort, and this one is called Eat Love Smith Falls. And this is a 10-day prefix food event, which will be taking place at restaurants in Smith Falls from Friday, February 19th through to the 28th. And each restaurant that's participating will feature an exclusive 3-course menu, and it will allow restaurants the opportunity to showcase their menu and benefit from group marketing efforts in what's traditionally a quiet time of year. The town will be sponsoring the program with a complimentary gift similar to the picnic program, and we will facilitate marketing efforts. So stay tuned for more information on that one. And finally, our Small Business Advisory Center has received a new pot of funds to create a virtual business advisory service called Ask the Experts. So small business owners with up to 10 employees can access one-on-one time with an expert at no charge for up to 3 hours. And help can be offered in accounting, legal services, social media, HR, business planning, coaching, and marketing. Small business owners can reach out to Cindy James at the Small Business Advisory Center for more information. And that's it for me tonight.
I see no questions, and thank you for that. I look forward to that week, February 19th. Does that mean we could literally eat out every evening?
Absolutely.
That would sound good to me. Thank you very much, Jennifer.
Thank you.
Next up is Director Dunlop, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A few updates from Public Works this evening. As many of you recall, we applied for an application through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities for a Municipal Asset Management Program grant last July. That was for an automated condition assessment of our street and sidewalk assets. I'm pleased to report that we're hearing that the government is now doing a review of that process at this time. With any luck, we should have a result on that grant in the next 2 weeks. So fingers crossed on that. The grant involved with that application is $33,994, of which we would be eligible for 80% funding on that. On the Beckwith Street Phase 2 front, staff are meeting with Morrison Hershfield tomorrow. We're getting our first blush presentation of the plan at 60% design. We're going to be seeing the electrical, the first review of the streetscaping particulars. More to follow on that, perhaps the next cow. I'm also pleased to report we have worked with Enbridge Gas on their utility. We always want to make sure that the utility companies get in, do their work before we arrive. Enbridge has some valve repairs they need to do on Beckwith Street at the intersection of Church. They are now looking at scheduling that in March and April of this year. So as we get closer to that date, we will share those particulars with the DBA, but again, very pleased to see the utility companies are staying ahead of our planned schedule. Other activities, the water tower, we do have some movement on the design after things were we'll say, fairly stagnant last year while we were waiting for funding under the ICIP Green Stream. We've had some recent discussions with RVCA on permitting, and essentially our near-term objective is to have some trees removed from the site. We've also engaged an environmental consultant because we do have to do some species at risk screening just to make sure that we've complied with all those requirements. Our objective, if everything goes through without hiccups, is to have the site cleared by spring. That would enable field survey and would allow a geotechnical program to advance. So things are moving on that project. Last update for tonight, very pleased to report that we got our first bills on our new street light system. And just to give context for council, those bills have gone from $10,700 a month all the way down to $4,600 a month. So big savings from LED. Very pleased to see that we're now reaping the rewards of all that work we did last year. Thank you.
No Christmas, but congratulations on that. That's a good news story for sure. Thank you for that, Director Dunlop. And I know you're going to be here later too. Yes. Thank you. CEO Morris.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So later on in the agenda, we have an update by Director Dunlop on the Phase 1 Beckwith project, both the construction progress and a financial accounting of at year end. So in normal times, when a community finishes a project of that nature, it would be customary to have some kind of a launch or ribbon cutting or at least acknowledgement of the work that was done. And despite the best efforts of the DBA and others to orchestrate such an event, we just had to suspend it because of the second wave. So what we've done instead of a traditional launch or ribbon cutting is we've developed a video of the project, and it features several prominent people, the mayor being one, Director Dunlop, and a few others. So what we would like to do is that we just finished it, and it'll be officially launched. Well, right now, it'll be made available on social media tomorrow, but we'd like to take 2 minutes of your time and show the video. So with that, I'll turn it over to Dave, and he will cue it up.
Thank you.
Beckwith Street has been the major thoroughfare through Smith Falls for well over 100 years. And we knew that we needed to create a much more welcoming and a much safer and a much more accessible downtown. And that was a primary driver for change.
The Beckwith Street project came together, I think, in part with a lot of great cooperation from Tomlinson as the constructor, Parsons as the contract administrator, town staff, and the Downtown Business Association.
Yes,
we're really excited about the prospects of Phase 2 in 2022.
Dave, any suggestions?
Council and myself are really proud of the difference it makes in accessibility to ensure that anyone and everyone can get into our downtown.
The new Beckwith Street has brought quite a few features that have enhanced accessibility. I feel very positive about.
Beckwith Street has been the major thoroughfare through Smith Falls for well over 100 years. And we knew that we needed to create a much more welcoming and a much safer and a much more accessible downtown. And that was a primary driver for change.
The Beckwith Street
Bear with us, folks. We seem to be having some
project came
challenges.
together, I think, in part with a lot of great cooperation from Tomlinson as the constructor, Parsons as the contract administrator, town staff, and the Downtown Business Association. We're really excited about the prospects of Phase 2 in 2022.
Well, perhaps what we
Council
could
and myself
do is we'll
are
make
really
the
proud
link
of the difference it
available,
makes
shortly after the meeting, and people can click on it and have a look for themselves. But the point here is that we wanted to mark the occasion and the end of a very, very significant project, at least phase 1 of that project. And without some form of celebration, it seems a little anticlimactic, and that would be an injustice for such a large project. So we will make the link available, and hopefully everyone can have a look at it and delight in the transformation that's occurred over the last year. So our apologies for the video, but it'll be available very shortly through social media and on the town website. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. The last is Director Costello.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2 quick updates for Council. The first is a bi-monthly update regarding the Community Improvement Plan COVID-19 funding. It was promised to Council that we would update you regarding Program 2 of the CIP for the purpose of COVID-19 related upgrades. Just a note for Council that planning staff have received no new applications to date for COVID-19 related upgrades under this program. We will continue to update you though if applications come forward. The second update is just regarding our annual reporting to the Information and Privacy Commission regarding Freedom of Information requests for the year 2020. In 2020, we had 4 Freedom of Information requests. All were completed within the 30-day time frame. 3, all the information was disclosed, and the final one, we had no responsive records. So that's a legislative report that we must do for the IPC annually, and that was done on January 21st. That concludes my reports.
Councillor Dwyer has a question or comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carrie, can you just articulate publicly and for Council's benefit what the average cost of the FOI was to the recipient? Because I don't think a lot of people understand that when you file an FOI, there's an initial filing fee, which is quite nominal, it's $5. But then based on the request, the FOI is charged according to the amount of material. Can you advise kind of what the average was, and then whether or not all 4 of those requests were completed and people picked up the submission and paid the full cost owing?
Certainly. So 2020 is probably a different year for Freedom of Information requests, Councillor Dwyer. There was no other fees associated with these 4 requests. There was the $5 application fees. For the most part, what was disclosed was 1 or 2 sheets of material. For larger requests under the legislation, we can charge the $5 administration fee. We can also charge $7.50 per minute for administrative costs. And we can also charge for photocopying as well as putting any information on a CD or a memory stick. That has occurred in 2019 where we did charge. And has occurred already in 2021. However, in 2020, the only fees we received were application fees.
Thank you.
Councillor Alford, you had your hand up.
And then that was something that the province legislated with regard to COVID?
No, that's a normal, that's under the Municipal Freedom of Information Protection Act. The fees have been in place for as long as I've been the coordinator for Freedom of Information.
Because if I recall, Carrie, in 2019, it was a not a considerable amount of money. It was a substantial amount of money. I can't recall what the number was, but.
In 2019, we had over a dozen Freedom of Information requests, most of which were very time consuming. So there was estimates given and fees charged by the town for those requests.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor McKenna has a question? Comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to comment, this legislation is terrific. It's been around for a couple of decades at least now. And in the past, people wouldn't be able to access government information like this. So it is a very important piece of legislation. And I'm glad to hear, Director Costello, that we're in compliance with all of the matters surrounding it. So it's shedding light on this, on matters that in the past used to be kept private is really good news. And I mean, you hope people don't take advantage of it and look for frivolous requests, but that doesn't seem to be the case. So it's thanks for keeping us up to date on it.
Reports. So we're going to leave the in-camera till the end, and we're going to move to 8 priority issues. And 8.1 is Housing Strategy Implementation Report with our Senior Planner, Grenke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just hold on a second. Sorry about that. The house phone started ringing right away. So the first report I'm going to be presenting this evening is on the housing strategy implementation. So as council will recall, just about 1 month ago, we adopted a housing task force that presented 17 recommendations. This, of course, is a foundational document and that's intended to sort of bring to life and plot a path forward to achieve council's first strategic priority, which is housing. So while this report is fairly fresh in everyone's memory, we wanted to bring forward the 17 recommendations that are included and give our thoughts as staff on how we would be implementing them and seeking council's direction on looking at some of these in particular. So a lot of the recommendations are zoning matters, and we do have in our in the draft budget a provision for an upcoming zoning review. So looking at the first recommendation, so looking at parking requirements for large and small scale projects. The second recommendation regarding the allowing secondary dwelling units and semi-detached and row house dwellings, those would be looked at through the zoning process. And just to confirm, the recent changes to the Planning Act do require us to include planning policies regarding secondary units, but we do have some leeway to customize policies to accommodate neighborhood context. So we will be researching that, of course, in greater detail at that time. The recommendation to reduce the minimum dwelling size requirements for dwellings, that would be also looked at through zoning, as well as the minimum lot size in residential zones. So that's those of course, those are all pieces that need to be looked at carefully together to make sure that we balance the objectives of creating as of right development opportunities and gentle intensification opportunities while protecting the character of our existing communities. Recommendation number 5, to allow provisions to accommodate mixed-use development in shopping center zones. That's certainly something that's being looked at by a lot of other municipalities, but that would require an amendment to our official plan. And in our view, that's perhaps not as urgent a priority. We have a very small number of properties that that have either shopping center designation or zoning. So that's something that can certainly come forward in the future, but perhaps not as urgent a priority as some of the other zoning changes. So looking at ground floor residential development in some circumstances in our downtown core, so such as at the back or in other places, that's something that we would look at through zoning, as well as pre-zoning to allow some more R4 or R5 type of residential uses along collector roads and in other targeted areas. So that would require a careful review through the zoning process. So these are certainly items that once we release our RFP would be provided for the consultant to advise us on. The next couple of recommendations are related to land sale bylaws and listing of town-owned land that's reasonably available for residential development. And work has been done on that over the last little while, and that will continue with the clerk. I have a couple of helpers. I have a couple of helpers with me, but just bear with me a moment, please.
Madam Chair, would you like me to go ahead with priority item B?
Sure, that would be good.
Certainly. This is coming forward to committee tonight to get your approval to continue using the virtual meeting format. Obviously, with our new the new announcement today extending the declaration of the emergency and the stay-at-home orders until February 9th. It is being recommended that we stay with the virtual format until at least March 23rd, 2021, and at which time we can look at the numbers then and reconvene and make a decision if we will meet back in person.
Just thumbs up, yeah. I mean, it's just a piece of information, really, with the advice that we've been given. But I thank you for bringing that to our attention. I think all of us would love to get back to having in-person meetings, but at this point in time, it's not really an option. So thank you for bringing this forward, and this will come forward not tonight, but next.
No, we still have our bylaw that we passed in March or April.
So it's just information.
Just information at this point.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I don't see our, oh, there, go ahead, Senior Planner Granke. Are you back? No?
Hi there. Thank you for that. I was had a brief little visit there. So well, before I continue, I'll ask the chair if would committee like to discuss any of the items below, or should I continue with the recommendations?
Anyone have questions or comments on what we've just heard? Councillor McKenna, go ahead.
I'll wait to the end.
Okay, I think it's probably better if we wait till the end. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So recommendation number 10 is a review of the town's property standards and yards bylaws, and that would be done in-house and brought forward by staff. So stakeholder consultation would be very helpful to scope and refine the issues and solutions. This would be spearheaded by our corporate services department and by law enforcement. And we expect that there would be minor legal review costs, but broadly speaking, this would be accommodated in our 2021 budget. And our target is to bring this forward later on this year. Recommendation number 11 is a big one. And that would be one of the most transformational of the recommendations proposed, and that's to develop and implement an affordable housing community improvement plan. So there's a lot that would need to be thought about in there. We need to look about what is meant by affordability, how long the affordability provision would apply, where we look at the programs, and also what these programs would look like. So there is a statutory process that needs to that needs to be followed to implement that, and that it follows much of the same process as required for the adoption of an official plan. So that includes a notice, including a notice and a minimum of one public meeting. So our current community improvement plan was developed by consultants retained by the town, and it's certainly been a very important and detailed plan. So we would expect that a consultant would be retained here to develop an appropriate suite of programs that would efficiently leverage the tools at our disposal to return our investment and create more affordable units. So our anticipation, and again, this council would be providing the ultimate direction on this, but staff's initial anticipation is that an affordable housing CIP could apply to the entire town and actually exist alongside the existing CIP. So the two community improvement plans would of course have different mandates and objectives, and we need to work to take care to minimize the overlap in programming. So we don't have a budget allocation for this in 2021, but certainly we can look at that for 2022. So we have reached out to some municipalities who've adopted similar community improvement plans to address affordable housing. We haven't we don't have an average figure at this point that we can present, but it will likely the cost would likely be in the range of maybe in the range of 50,000 or similar to our zoning bylaw. So that would be something that can be put forward for consideration in the 2022 budget. And of course, staff can investigate if there's any grant opportunities for that as this comes forward. Recommendation 12 would be to develop and distribute a residential development information guide to provide information and support to rental housing developers. And certainly we expect that, we anticipate that similar work has been done in other municipalities to basically provide some user-friendly information to assist and guide people through the process. And if it's been done well elsewhere, we can certainly work from that as best as possible. There may be some graphics work and printing costs, but the overall cost would likely be pretty minor. The recommendations 13 and 14 would be the outreach components. So we would be coordinating the hosting of legal clinics and workshops to help inform tenants, renters, and smaller scale landlords on legal rights within the housing context, and also provide basically education as best we can. And one of the later recommendations is the creation of a housing advisory committee, and we expect we anticipate if that committee gets formed, there would be certainly some skill sets and experience on that committee who'd be able to assist on guiding this, and ultimately our hope is that promotional costs, facility rental costs would be minor, but this would be addressed likely through the Housing Advisory Committee. The next couple of recommendations pertain to support the priorities and development of partnerships and not-for-profit organizations, and meeting with the county housing as needed. So our recommendation to implement that is applicable staff or elected official be appointed as the liaison with the county and also on housing matters, and be the principal point person between town departments and stakeholders in the housing sector. And certainly when housing inquiries come into town hall, there's a number of departments, including economic development, corporate services, and planning within corporate services. We work closely together in a lot of these. And then the final recommendation, and we welcome council's feedback on how much of when you'd like to get started on that, is that council appoint a housing advisory committee to oversee and assist on implementing the recommendations of the task force. And we think that they would have a number of roles there, including potentially being an evaluation committee for the future CIP, as well as providing some strategic direction, especially on some of the educational components. So if that's something that council would like to see move forward sooner rather than later, then we can prepare a draft terms of reference. So I think this broadly covers the recommendations of the Housing Task Force, and I look for council's council's feedback on this, and if there's anything that you'd like to say move higher or lower on the priority list. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. I too have small monkeys that just walked through the door, so I'm going to go fast just in case all hell breaks loose. I'm sure it'll be fine. Carl, can you provide a little bit of clarity about what you see the distinction in the terms of reference being between the Housing Advisory Committee and the Housing Task Force? Because to me, I would see their mandate being very closely linked and kind of a continuation of the terms of reference that we've already been using, unless it's staff's suggestion that we go in a different direction.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Councillor. Excellent question. I think broadly we expect that if the Housing Task Force members are interested in continuing to stay involved in this capacity, we expect a lot of and hope for a lot of the same membership. I think one recommendation that staff may have is that we look at perhaps scoping it to perhaps a more either directly Smith Falls residents or folks who work within specific organizations in Smith Falls. That's something that we can look at. We've had some excellent feedback from the County of Lanark and others through the development of the Housing Task Force, but we expect there'd be a lot of the same membership, a lot of the same focus, and we see that this would be a natural evolution from the task force that had that specific mandate and responsibility of creating this report, and then those who are responsible for sort of overseeing the implementation of it.
Great, thanks, Carl. I mean, that answers my question, and it's more or less what I assume. So, I mean, to answer your question about council consensus, I mean, I'll give my 2 cents. I would think that this is a committee that we should formulate relatively quickly, so that we're not losing momentum. And if the terms of reference from the task force can very easily be manipulated or just recycled and turned into the task or the committee's terms of reference, I think that's probably a good use of resources. Is there a recommendation on the floor from staff as to who the staff appointee would be on this?
Go ahead.
At this point, we don't have a recommendation. I will discuss with the CAO Morris and Director Costello, and we'll work out a game plan for how that committee would be staffed and run.
Okay, Councillor McGuire has a question, a comment. Go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair, and thanks a lot, Carl. It's great to see this moving forward as quickly as it is. I had a comment on the first recommendation about parking, just that I think it's great that we're looking at reducing the parking requirements for large and or small scale projects. I'd like to see that go even further, where we look at opportunities for using municipal parking spaces that are underused for residential housing and off-peak hours, because I think that there's a big opportunity there that would unlock a lot of higher quality housing in more dense areas if we could get more parking to those units. I had a comment too on the content for rental housing developers. I think it's important to have good information and good products to give out to larger multi-unit developers, but I also think there's an opportunity there with the content to focusing on people that are looking at accessory dwellings in their house that maybe don't have building experience. here's an example of 5 types of firewalls, or here's an example of how many square feet you need. Here's an example of 5 standard layouts. So, you know, if I've got 300 square feet that's underused right now in my house, it makes it really easy for me to get through the building permit process and get that unit on the market. So I hope that can really encompass encompass everybody from the like the family to, you know, the bigger players. Lastly, with the CIP, I think it's a really neat idea to have a CIP for affordable housing. It's I'm hoping that those ones could be based more around, say, the tax abatement options or reduction in planning fees or those kind of things. So we're not having to budget huge chunks of money for subsidies the way it works more for the existing CIP we've got now. But I'm sure that's something that, you know, there'll be a whole process to that in public consultation. My only question is, with this housing, how we've got the Planning Advisory Committee and we've got this Housing Task Force turned into committee. How do we see those two committees working together, and do we see any overlap between the two mandates going forward?
Grinke, go ahead.
Thank you. So thank you, Councillor. Excellent questions. And just to respond firstly to your suggestion about the with respect to what we want to see in the housing in the guide, that's very important. Ultimately, we want to make it as easy and as friendly as possible for people to develop that sort of those sorts of even small scale accessory apartments in addition to larger ones. So that's a good comment. The CIPs that we have seen in other municipalities for affordable housing, the tax abatement is actually probably the most common tool that I have seen. So that would be certainly something worth looking at. We've seen development charge rebates. We've seen that the refund on feasibility studies. There's a number of additional tools, and certainly the point about minimizing, I guess, the overall budget impact is a good one. In terms of the interrelationship between the Planning Advisory Committee, this proposed advisory committee, and staff and consultants through the zoning process, that's something we'll have to look at. Ultimately, we welcome feedback from as many sources as we can as we go through this process, but certainly we want to make sure it's done as efficiently and expeditiously as possible. So certainly if this committee is underway while we're working on the zoning, then we can definitely bounce ideas off. My original thought is that the Planning Advisory Committee would likely be a steering committee for the zoning review work, but if there's housing specific items, and if council would like to see this, then we can certainly review that with this other committee as well. I think the more advice and guidance we get from our community, the better the product is.
Thanks, Carl. Very encouraging to see this moving ahead so quickly. And of course, the Housing Task Force had the responsibility of, I guess, filling up the toolbox with a number of things that could be utilized to encourage and enable more housing, more affordable housing. And I think the recommendations here moving forward quickly will help do that. And so on the zoning change, it's nice to see so many being encompassed within that one major policy change. And with regard to secondary suites, I think the other factor that this benefits is home ownership. And as the prices of homes in our community rise and maybe become unaffordable for people, having that secondary suite enables people to have a rental unit, which of course would help make our homes more affordable as well. So I think there's a lot of benefits from some of the things that are happening here. Regarding the CIP, I think this is probably next to partnering with not-for-profits. I think it's probably the next biggest tool in the box. And I think it's one that my preference would be that we escalate that as a priority, understanding that although the development that has been proposed right now for Chambers Street is within our CIP zone, future developments that may come down the road in the near future may not be. And I think one of the key drivers of success for a not-for-profit or for affordable housing is going to be the possibility of a CIP and primarily the tax abatement that could come out of that. And I think the delaying that could stand as a barrier to us attracting further affordable housing development or RGI housing development. So I would like to see that escalated and understanding if it's going to be outsourced anyway. It's probably not a lot more work on staff. It's more a matter of hiring a consultant to do that. If we have the money, let's say the roughly $50,000 to do that, and I guess we'll leave that with staff to look into our reserves, and I'm thinking of our building reserve possibly as a tool to escalate that as a priority. When it comes to, I'm not sure what number was, but legal clinics, workshops, that was a very hot topic going back to about a year ago when the Housing Task Force was still meeting. And we were looking at feedback from social services that that's something they want to be able to participate in because they have a lot of their clients who are facing challenges on a very frequent basis. And I probably get a call, 2 or 3 calls a month, or emails or messages from people who are at risk of losing their housing, and I'm referring them on to the legal clinic for support. And I think it's something we would like to see. I think we postponed it based on COVID, but I think our ability to operate in this virtual world, I think we should advance that fairly quickly because there's a big gap between what tenant rights are out there and what tenants understand what are their rights. And finally, the Housing Advisory Committee, I believe that's really important. And I think we have the framework from the Housing Task Force, and I would like to see that advance fairly quickly because I think we have so much more work to do in this area, and understanding even though we have one good development on the way, we probably need 6 or 8 or 10 more others. Not, of course, also understanding a lot of secondary suites and can also help fill those gaps. And it's a priority we need to get resolved, and I think all of these steps will be a big step in the right direction. Thank you.
Councillor Brennan, you had your hand up, I think.
Yeah, I did. Just a quick comment on Councilor McGuire's linkages between the new committee and the Planning Advisory Committee. There's a lot of expertise, as Councilor Alford will attest, on the Planning Advisory Committee and on housing, and they're smart people. It might be an idea to have a rep from the Planning Advisory Committee on the new committee as well, and that would provide a linkage and inform the PAC on what's going on. So just a suggestion.
Thank you. I agree with you, Councillor Brennan. I think, did you have your hand up? Oh, sorry. You just switching. I, with the mayor, sat on this committee, and these recommendations that came forward, we were hoping that they would come forward rather quickly because this is a priority, I think. Housing, I know we've all chatted with people who are looking for an apartment or looking for somewhere to live, and so it's an important thing. Thank you, Senior Planner Grenke, for this. I'm most impressed too with the fact that we're looking at the property standards bylaw, because there isn't a month goes by that I don't get complaints or people wondering about it. And I think that when we look at that bylaw, one of the things we need to do is shorten the time of it takes. We give people way too long, and neighbors and people living in homes have to put up with that for a long time. So all of these recommendations, I think, are worthy of moving forward, and I hope that the advisory committee can be formed very quickly. I see hands up, so I'm going to backtrack now to Councillor McKenna. I believe you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Councillor Alford and I were waving at you there. So just a couple of comments on, I agree with the mayor regarding perhaps accelerating the community improvement plan for housing if possible. but for different reasons. I was looking at mid 2022, which would take us into July, which I think at that point we may become a lame duck council, and probably one of the most important, well, it'd be getting now to the end of our term. So I would like to think that we could wrap this up at, given that we would have the most information on it before the end of our term. So if we can move that up a few months, that would be terrific from my point of view. And on I wonder if either the mayor or the CEO or the planner or the committee has put their crystal ball hat on or looked at the crystal ball. When I think about item number 6, residential in the downtown commercial zone, this question has been coming up for a lot of small towns for a long, long time. And given, this was before COVID, given the move to working from home, the lack of office space, banks going virtually online and closing a lot of, we have the potential of having a surplus in commercial space in our downtown core like many other communities. I just wonder, it's a much larger issue. So I would like to emphasize the importance of not letting that perhaps usable space go unused for housing and not to get stuck on the old commercial model, which is businesses. I would love the downtown to bounce right back. Nothing would make me happier. I have a feeling that COVID has accelerated an issue that was coming down the pipeline at a lot of small towns. Is how much commercial space do they need in their downtown? I don't have the answer to that one, but I hope the consultants perhaps have some expertise or some insight into that. What is the long term for small town commercial areas? My final comment is on the, I had them all written down. Just to the size of the advisory committee, I think the task force needed to be large because we were gathering a lot of information and using a lot of expertise from a variety of areas. I would like to think that the implementation group or the is much more action focused and could be much smaller and tighter. I think it will accelerate the work that needs to be done. As we all know how difficult it is to get a dozen or 15 people together for a meeting to get some work done is very challenging. So my advice is to consider a very small, lean, highly focused group regarding that implementation and then go out for consultation when need be. So thank you very much. And I too agree with, I think it's a real treat to see this moving along at a very good pace. Thank you, Mr. Granke.
That's perfect.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll keep my, most everyone has mentioned some of the things I thought about, but the one question I had is with regard to development charges. When in the report, it says, in response to feedback from developers, they're open to developing affordable housing, but they need a business case to provide it. And also we have spoken about, you know, waiving tax abatement, that kind of thing. And I wonder how development charges, again, we've spoken about them for a very long time. And some of that would be the carrot if we had them. Some of those would be the carrot that we could use to engage developers in, we could waive those as opposed to now looking for another avenue like tax abatement. When development charges could be the carrot in the future. So that would be one comment I would have. And I agree with Councillor McKenna about keeping this committee small. And I, you know, I would say 5 people. If you can get 5 people who could focus intently on this for the next few months, then also, as Councillor McKenna mentioned, it would be nice if we could put a period about on our number 1 strategic initiative prior to us to the next election, the end of our term. Those are my comments, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see anyone. Oh, sorry. See, Morris, did you have a comment?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. So if this has been a good discussion, and I think it's given us some needed insight. The one item that's kind of dangling there is the acceleration of the affordable housing CIP. So there's a couple spoke in favor of it. If that is the direction of committee, we will look at the resourcing requirements to do that and bring that back to you. I would just like to remind committee that our existing CIP is under review, so that's been our priority. But if we need to make some adjustments, we can do so and let you know what the cost will be.
Councillor Dwyer.
Thank you. I think Councillor Alfred made an excellent point because the CIP, in my mind, is going to tie mostly into those big ticket offset piece, the DCs, the tax abatement strategies, things like that. And without knowing for sure what the impact of the DC rate is going to be, I think it's almost a little premature to craft a CIP policy that would respond to that. That's just my own 2 cents. I know we're working on the DCs. Hopefully we'll see something soon. Perhaps a CIP for affordable housing as a priority for 2022. And hey, it could be our last little showpiece of the term and everybody can say goodbye. Congratulations, we've got a CIP for affordable housing.
Thank you. Yeah, I respect the fact that we will have a discussion on DCs in the not so distant future and make decisions on that. And that will have a bearing, I think, and the ability to waive DCs for affordable housing development will be a factor. The CIP and potential tax abatement, I look at somewhat differently. In my experience in the most recent project, it's the operating cost which includes or excludes taxes or what taxes are, as a major bearing in what makes it a project affordable over the long term, and the ability for a developer, let's say especially a not-for-profit, to be able to come up with a model that makes a project viable. And so I think I would like, at least if committee is willing, to have staff come back with some further insights into how this looks. Some examples like Belleville, where it has been done recently, and so we have a fulsome discussion on it rather than perhaps setting it aside at this stage, and consider the possibilities when that time comes.
Is that an option? Could that be our next step?
Yes, it can be.
Okay, that sounds good to me. Okay, there's no more comments. Hopefully we'll have someone come back to us. 2 things I think that we've mentioned. The committee should be formed soon, and it should be small, and it should be one that's going to get together and get some things done and be supportive to staff's recommendations here. And also, if you could come back with what the mayor asked for, that would be great. 2 next steps, unless there's anything else. Okay, thank you. So our next priority is with Director Dunlop, and it's Beckwith Street Phase 1 Reconstruction Year-End Status Report. Go ahead, Director Dunlop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the purpose of the report before Council this evening is to discuss the Phase 1 Beckwith Street Reconstruction Project, in particular where the finances wrapped up as of December 31st of 2020, and also to shed some light on the carry forward works that are happening next year as well. You'll see in your agenda package, I did include the council report from last August. That was essentially the project, or the report that council launched this construction project with. So I felt it was important to have that information in hand if you had any questions around the original budget. So I won't go too much over that detail. I'll just talk about the project itself. So if there's any questions at the end, by all means, let me know. As everyone is aware, the project did start on October the 7th in 2019. That project carried through with an underground program throughout the winter. We did have a 3-week period of a shutdown around the period of Christmas and New Year's of 2019 and 2020. Certainly the conditions that we had last winter were very conducive to construction. We were very fortunate to have little snow, much like the winter we're having right now. Cold temperatures weren't substantial, and it was providing a very favorable conditions for winter construction to advance. So we're very fortunate that decision to proceed with winter construction played off well. Of course, in March of 2020, the pandemic arrived. Beckwith Street was one of the very few projects in our region that was allowed to continue, much in part because it involved work on a provincial connecting links corridor. We did see some reductions in crews during that period initially, and in particular April, when Tomlinson did reduce their crew presence on site. They had some pressures, obviously, managing through the pandemic, no different than other employers. So we did have a loss of production, but we did continue through that period. It's very important to communicate through the report as well that we did not have any financial impacts per se from the pandemic itself. So we were very fortunate to continue, and we did not incur any extras as a result of that occurring during the project. Fast forward to October of 2020, the project did receive substantial completion on October the 30th. Now that is defined under terms that are spelled out in the Ontario provincial standards and specifications. So essentially it's a threshold of $1 amount, and also takes into consideration that that's the point in time when the asset was put in service, and thus traffic was able to travel over the street at that point. So that qualified the project for substantial completion at that time. After that date, of course, you did see streetscape activities happening. We were doing the last of the interlock. We also had electrical works happening on the signals and lights that were wrapping up. Moving forward, as we got closer to cold weather, we did final inspections on the project in the month of November. There's two aspects that come out of a final inspection. So there's deficiencies, that would be defects in works that are essentially done, and incomplete works, so any works that have to be completed to fulfill the ultimate completion of contract. I'll draw your attention to page 2 of the report. There's table 1 included at the bottom of that sheet. You're going to see essentially the unaudited project expenses for Beckwith Street broken into 3 categories. There were essentially 3 expense streams that we manage funds under. First was, of course, waterworks utilities. Second is wastewater utility. Thirdly was tax supported components of the project. We have a breakout of each of those areas for the benefit of council. You'll see we have our approved budget, again, which is carried forward from August of 2019. The actual costs we incurred, the net change. We identified if the projects are complete, and we identified the associated variances. So at the wrap up of the project, we're pleased to report, at least in the waterworks end, though those works were completed, $113,000 under budget. As approved, of course, last fall. So that's about 8.42% under the forecasted budget for that area. The wastewater section was very marginally over budget. It was about $9,000 or $9,500 over budget, correlated to about a 0.58% increase in the sewer utility to complete that work. And the tax supported work is not completed in full right now, but right now we're forecasting savings of 0.67% or $35,882. So that would be after the works are completed in the spring. I won't get into all of the details of the works carried forward next year. You do see them itemized in the report. If there's any questions about those, we can certainly come back to them. On the third page of the report, I just want to talk a bit about the Tomlinson contract itself. You know, we had numerous expenses that do essentially in combination create the whole project budget, but certainly the Tomlinson contract was the largest. Essentially, when it comes to a unit price contract such as theirs, there are variances that cause change essentially in the contract price. So that happens through one of two means. In a unit price contract, you can have variances in your final project by virtue of the measured quantities. As an example, when we go into construction, we have estimates of how much rock we have to take out. Of course, that is measured throughout construction and we pay based on actual. So there's that component of variance in the pricing, and also extras. There's definitions of what extras are under the Ontario provincial standards and specifications. Where they fit, items are paid out as extras in accordance with contract law. So that's kind of the two areas of variance. I have itemized out those areas for council's benefit. In combination, very pleased to report that the Tomlinson contract was completed, and I take into account the forecasted costs in the spring. We're forecasting at 5.34% over contract award amount. Just to give the committee some context, when provincial contracts are granted under provincial grant programs, as example, a 15% contingency allowance is carried for major infrastructure projects. So very pleased that we were able to deliver this project at 5.34% contingency use, again, quite a bit below what industry does carry. So we've certainly touched on the expenses in the contract, and I think it's important to also draw the committee's attention to the revenues. Changes were had there, and we wanted to draw the committee's attention to that. First is the OCIF top-up grant 2017. Again, that's the application-based grant that funded the the underground program, so your water, sewer, and drainage. Taking council back to last summer, there was an impetus to have the project advanced so that we could get those monies spent prior to December 31st, if possible. That was part of the decision to move forward with a construction project in the winter. We did end up completing $748,882 of that grant program by the deadline. Unfortunate that a series of lobbying efforts with the Ministry of Infrastructure were not successful in getting that deadline extended even for a short period. So a bit of a challenge there, but again, the advancement of winter construction certainly did salvage that situation. We also had grants that were introduced to the project during construction, or we'll say post-award. The 2018 Main Street Revitalization Grant that was released throughout Ontario had fixed amount of funding with a shopping list of investments in small towns, downtowns, where you could invest these monies. The town ended up investing $47,229 towards the decorative street lighting purchases on this project. So that was assigned against the project revenues as well. So in closing, just to give context, the Beckwith Phase 1 forecasted budget on completion, again, taking into account the carry forward that's in the third draft of the budget, puts the project at $8.13 million. That's net of HST expenses. The expenses in the project were $140,192 below the overall budget that was approved by council last fall. With that said, the revenues were also had a shortfall of $137,737. The net result of that is, with the forecast, we're looking at a very, very modest surplus of just over $2,000, so $2,455. So that's where everything is lining up with the first phase of construction. Thank you.
Director Dunlop, or comments? Go ahead, Councillor Alford.
I I feel like we should, I feel like there was an old commercial that said, "We've come a long way, baby." Because I feel like we've come a long way since we first started discussing this project. And to see that we are basically on time and on budget is an incredible, once in every 2 generations do we get an opportunity to take this on. And I would not have wanted to try and do this project without Mr. Dunlop. I think everything that we hoped for, everything that we could have expected has been delivered. I would also say that, well, there was when we first found out that this project was going to be a lot more than we had anticipated, and right from that we received 1 tender, and there was a lot of barriers to pulling this off. And I'm really thankful and grateful to both Mr. Dunlop, but also to Greenbelt, which then later turned into Tomlinson, because they were very professional and flexible, and had the resources, as Troy said at the beginning, they had the resources to overcome anything that we ran into. So I don't have anything to say but kudos to our staff, and I'm overjoyed that this is the way this whole thing worked out. Because when we first started, we were all half of us were relatively new in the chairs. So I'm really grateful to our staff for this report. Now let's get to phase 2.
Any other comments? Oh, go ahead, CL Norris.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to publicly acknowledge Mr. Dunlop's efforts. These types of downtown projects are complex by nature. They're typically fraught with unknowns. When you dig up an old street that was, with infrastructure from the 1800s, you never know what you're going to find. Troy applied a very laser-focused approach to this project, and to come in with a surplus of $2,400 on a $8.3 million project is absolutely astonishing. So I'd like to publicly thank him for his efforts. He was also running a department at the same time as handling one of our biggest infrastructure projects. So it was capably handled, and he deserves a great deal of thanks.
I see nodding heads and.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Mayor Panko, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just I guess very similar comments. I mean, when you run into a snag with funding and can't utilize all that funding, but still find a way to bring a project in under budget, although it's 0.03%, it's not a huge extra, but it's still very encouraging, very rewarding to know that despite the complexity, what's been done, and through winter months and through some pretty rough weather, able to pull it all together. So again, just to Troy, thank you, and we're happy you're at the helm for phase 2.
Thank you very much.
I think we all agree that this was done well, and everything that, since I've known you and worked with you, your reports are stellar. I don't have to go back and reread them or try and figure them out. I always understand what you're saying to us, and I appreciate your dedication. And the street looks lovely, and I hope that phase 2 turns out just as well, and I'm sure with your leadership it will. Yes, go ahead, Director Dunlop.
I'd just like to make a comment that at the staff level, we significantly appreciate the support of council through this project. It does cause a lot of disruption to a community, to the businesses, to individual residents. It was a pleasure to work through this project and have the support of council to work through those issues with those individual parties without things going awry. Again, very happy for council's leadership throughout all phases of the project, and very, very important to staff to have that support from start to finish. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Dunlop. Okay, our last priority issue this evening is 8.4 Tree Canopy Preservation and Enhancement Policy Report. And that's again with Senior Planner Grenke.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm bringing forward, I'm very pleased to bring forward a policy that's has been before you in draft form in earlier reports, and we are hopeful is ready to be adopted and approved by council. So just to summarize, based on council's direction from previous meetings, we drafted a report that was intended with the policies intended to focus on educating residents, promoting best practices, and exploring opportunities for municipal leadership in our operations. So generally avoiding a regulatory framework that includes restrictions and penalties for individual property owners. So that may come later if council chooses, but that's not what's incorporated within the draft policy. So back last May, council reviewed an original draft and sought to obtain public feedback to ensure the policies are ultimately of interest to residents, and also look for public's feedback on where we would want to plant trees and enhance the tree canopy. So the feedback was not. We did not get a large number of responses, but the 27 responses that we did get have been very helpful, and certainly I'm very appreciative of the time and work invested by the respondents in providing us that feedback. They did highlight that support the need to preserve or enhance tree coverage for new development. So those who did respond felt that it was important for us to do. Parks and streets were identified as the most important areas to focus efforts, less so on private property. And we did present a range of public open space options for public space ideas, and a botanical garden and edible tree grove had some public interest. And an edible tree grove was also brought up by councillors at the meeting. I think that's something to look at in the longer term. And there was a pretty broad level of interest in a tree sale or tree giveaway program, and that sort of aligns with the incentivizing of tree plantings as one of the strategic items in the strategic plan. So it is important to most residents who responded to have feedback on the species of trees planted in close proximity to their property. And the other question as to where residents wanted to see us focus, where we wanted to identify the priority areas where the tree replacement ratio would be larger. I'm not surprised that the feedback we received was downtown industrial commercial areas, and also the uptown area, the uptown residential area surrounding the downtown as areas where the town should focus its efforts on enhancing the tree canopy, and also Lower Reach Park. And Lower Reach Park has seen a lot of trees planted over the last number of years, and even just going for a walk down there, we can see many more even just within the last year or so. So we're certainly on the right track there. So the public response did not necessitate wholesale changes to the policy, but we did improve it in a few areas. So I think we've attempted to accomplish a number of key objectives. So articulate our recognition of a robust tree canopy. That's a key public interest and benefit for our community, and there's a number of reasons why that's the case. Also identify best practices as a resource for residents and town staff. Require the replacement of municipal trees and identify these priority areas where it would happen at a higher ratio. and expand on the OP's policies to landscaping and naturalization. So we have some fairly broad-ish policies right now, and we would be proposing to sort of flesh them out and give ideas on how council would like to see that implemented. So we've established a number of, I guess, ideas and supported measures in through site plan and subdivision approvals, and of course those aren't all going to apply in every given circumstance, but in many cases many of them would, and that would give us and give proponents some ideas and direction as to how to incorporate this within their planting plans, and also identify measures and programs we can consider to promote the tree canopy enhancement. So I think the policy also has to recognize that municipal resources on their own cannot fulfill all of the outlined objectives. We need to work with others. There are Conservation Authority and a number of other organizations have the resources, have the skill sets and the connections who would be very important on that. It's certainly not something that we can do on our own, but there's lots of people who we can work with. We're also very careful in the proposed policy with respect to promising resources. So the policy avoided committing us to substantial budget obligations, rather presenting implementation ideas that can be funded based on the availability of funds through the budget process. So that would certainly, there's resources are tight right now, and we're quite cognizant of that. So ultimately, I'd like to appreciate the time invested by RVCA staff, public works staff, and corporate services, the director of corporate services and the director of community services and their departments for the time that they've spent on working with us on this policy. It really is a multidisciplinary policy. So I think at this point, I'm pleased to recommend that council adopts a bylaw to adopt our new tree canopy preservation and enhancement policy. Thank you.
Comments, questions? Mayor Penko?
Thank you. And Carl, another great piece of information tonight, and one obviously that will have a major impact on our community going forward for all the reasons outlined, and of course playing a major role in our fight against climate change and our responsibilities there. I like your comment regarding the Urban Forest Advisory Committee. I think that would be an important thing for us to look at in the future. They can help guide us. When it comes to the recommended species of trees, is that communicated with or collaborated with local nurseries or retail stores that sell trees and shrubs? I guess just to make sure that the trees that are available for our citizens are the trees that are for sale locally. I guess it may be some collaboration there. And I'm wondering if there's a method of condensing this down into a guide or a couple of guides for our citizens as to, here are the trees that we recommend, here is how you're going to plant it, here's how you're going to care for it, to try to ensure that when people are investing in trees for the future of our community, that there's the best possible chance of success in these trees lasting.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Carl.
Thank you. With respect to the guide, yes, absolutely. That's very important. Ultimately, for this to be best used by as many people as possible, it needs to be incorporated into a sort of a user-friendly, targeted publication, and that's certainly something that we've identified as an important implementation piece so that we can get that out. And it's not rare. I do get questions from residents just looking for suggestions on what to plant, and I'd love to be able to, working with the Conservation Authority or others, get that information out. And I think there's those guides are out there, and certainly creating a Maiden Smith Falls approach to implementing this is important. The species list was provided to us by the Rideau Valley Conservation Authority, and it's not we haven't cross-referenced the list with local nurseries, but it is something that is certainly, these are for the most part species that are prevalent in our area. It's not necessarily intended to be exhaustive either. There's circumstances in which people come to us with other ideas and other trees that they'd like to see. And I think from through the site plan process, I think the most important thing is we're encouraging native trees. We don't want to see the sorts of tree species that either aren't going to survive in their context or become invasive, especially near natural areas. So it wasn't intended as a sort of an exclusive list, but essentially a sort of a guide idea species for folks who do want to take this on their own.
And Madam Chair, maybe one follow-up question.
Yes. Go ahead.
Just regarding tree preservation, and I can't recall where it was in there, but I believe there's a comment regarding possibly having a policy that could help preserve trees on private property or help provide guidance towards that. Obviously, so much more important to maintain what we have. We know how long it takes a tree to get to maturity. Is that something that we should be expecting in the future?
So to clarify, you were the idea of a site alteration bylaw or a tree cutting bylaw, something a little.
Yes.
Yeah, so that's certainly with council's direction, that's something that staff can investigate that as a separate policy item. I think it's fair to say we want to put a lot of work into enhancing our tree canopy policy by planting individual small trees here and there. But are we if that's offset by the removal of a woodlot somewhere, is that are we further ahead? Excellent question, and certainly that is a conversation that's been held, it's been bounced around by staff, and we can report back to council on how we can, if there's some options, if council would like to see how the regulatory, what sort of regulatory tools we have.
Great, thank you.
Councillor McGuire, did you have your hand up? Go ahead.
Yes, Madam Chair, but I think Councillor McKenna had his hand up before me.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Councillor McKenna.
Is that where you do age before beauty, Councillor McGuire? Is that what you're talking about? Thank you very much, Mr. Grinke. It's a very good policy, and I'll be supporting it. I did have some suggestions. One is I am interested in supporting the mayor's comments regarding protecting some trees that are being considered for development. So I would like to see that come back. One of the things that I noticed was absent, and I didn't see it the first time, and I should have picked it up then, was we're quite blessed because we're along a UNESCO World Heritage Site that we don't often, I forget about it. And there is some obligations, there are obligations that you don't just get the designation and then that's the end of it. There are ongoing obligations to ensure that we remain worthy of that designation. And one of them is the Rideau Landscape Corridor. So I will, maybe under the purpose, there's some way of saying, adding that wonderful feature that we're on the UNESCO World Heritage Site. It's another reason why we are developing this policy. And there may be something in there that we can add a line or two that we acknowledge that designation, and will continue to work to deserve to maintain that designation. And I think this is the kind of policy that was intended for much of the Rideau Landscape Corridor, which has gone silent, by the way. But that is an obligation to get that designation, and I don't know where we are with that. So that would be one piece of feedback. And the other is I find it, given the impact of Parks Canada in Smiths Falls in particular, the first mention of Parks Canada is on page 6, and that they weren't part of the consultation. And I know we won't be able to get very far with town-owned land or land that the parks own and that the town may have some say over without involving them. So I would certainly encourage either a mention of or strengthening them as a key partner. And I went online today to see if they had an actual tree policy, and I'm sure they do. Parks Canada does. And I just, but I couldn't find it. So I just want to make sure we complement or enhance something that they're already doing given their stature. Finally, if I may, Madam Chair, is there a definition of a boulevard? So the reason I ask, there's a definition of a boulevard tree, but it's a very broad category. And I'm thinking about the green space along the wartime houses in between where the front faces. There's large green corridors, none of which are treed. One has a large hydro easement going through it. But there's an ideal green space there that is just begging for more trees. So I didn't know if that constitute a boulevard or what you would call that chunk of land. Thank you. If I'm clear.
Councillor McGuire, did you want to say something as well? No?
Sure. Carl, did you have a response there you wanted to?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Councillor, for I've just been jotting down your notes. As far as adding UNESCO as a just a rationality acknowledgement, I'd be very pleased to add that. That's an excellent point. I can add that into the policy to it's not being presented for final approval tonight, so we can do that prior to final approval the next time. Certainly with respect to Parks Canada, our staff do work with them closely on anything regarding their within their area of jurisdiction, and I know we were certainly not trying to I guess way too deeply into their operational matters. They were consulted on a sort of on a high level fairly early on in this process and didn't give us a lot of key direction other than I think so long as their processes continue to follow. But we can certainly look at some little wording changes to highlight that point. So Boulevard, that's an excellent feedback there. It's one of those I guess a part of town-owned land that's not quite next to a street and not quite a park. So where does that fit within there? So I'll have a look at that and perhaps propose some language within the final draft. Could you just to assist? Could you please confirm the exact location within the town that you're looking at?
Well, Mackenzie, Churchill, all those streets that run the wartime houses off of Queen Street, they all were built with this beautiful green space between the rows of housing. And a Google search shows that there's no trees. There are street lights, and there's one that has a major hydro corridor, but it's just a large grass cutting exercise. And I'm sure having a whole bunch of trees there will make that a lot easier to cut the grass, but it's just a big vacant area that I'm just throwing my 2 cents worth in. Take it or leave it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor McGuire, you're next if you have something.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I thought it was interesting, Carl, that you noted that the new communities, people are looking for more trees in new communities. And I noticed that the setback from hydro lines is 8 meters, but the setback from Bird Utilities is only 2. So I'm wondering, would it be a good policy going forward to try to encourage the hydro lines going underground? It would leave more open space for trees, especially if we've got smaller lots or more density going back to the housing report. Is that something that the town has any influence on?
Thank you, Councillor. Certainly with respect to new developments, we do look in new subdivisions. We do look to have the lines buried, and I know Public Works Department has they've been involved in a lot of these discussions as well, with this, especially relating to existing communities. So perhaps with the chair's permission, I'd see if Director Dunlop would be able to follow up as it relates to utilities and operations.
I know he's still with us. He's going to be here. Go ahead, Director Dunlop.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So yes, I think as Carl had touched on, any new extensions of new municipal roads or streets, the requirement is to bury the utility underground, and there's some motherhood language in the official plan to that effect. So we certainly have a lot more latitude when it comes to planting trees when those utilities are underground. But as you can appreciate, the majority of the town of Smiths Falls does have overhead hydro with that. Obviously Bell Canada and Cogeco are strung up on those poles as well. So one of the challenges, I guess, when it comes to trees with overhead plants is arcing, and that hence the more significant setback that's required from that. You get into rainstorms or other things of that nature, and that risk is present. And Hydro One has been very, very diligent with their tree clearing program since the ice storm, obviously. With that said, you know, when they do their clearing efforts for their utility, it is very evident what their efforts are focused on. What we need to do with our new policy is ensure that when trees are planted in proximity to overhead utilities, that they are we pick the right species, the right location, so those trees are set up to succeed and not essentially to fail in 25 years when they're at their peak. So that's something that we need to impress upon going forward.
Great. Thanks, Director Dunlop. I think I just want to thank everybody in Parks and Public Works and planning that went into this, because it's an excellent document. I think I really like how, you know, Carl, you've made a really holistic view of it, from homeowner education to what we can do as a town and getting everybody on the same page. One thing I'd really like to see when we get into 2022 budget is putting some more money behind this, because now that we've got the policy, I think we really need to invest in it to see the progress. I think not just in buying tree stock, but we need to make sure that we've got adequate resources to do the early maintenance, make sure that the young trees are getting watered, pruned, trimming. I think that first 15, 20 years of the tree's life really defines the next 80 years and how much it's going to cost to maintain, and if we're really going to get the full value out of that asset. So yeah, I'm hoping going forward we can put some more resources into this. Thank you.
Councillor Alfred. I saw your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of things, Carl. It is a very good report, and thank you for it. The site alteration bylaw, it's not like you haven't heard me talk about this before, and the Planning Advisory Committee as well, and I believe Councillor Dwyer was at one point on the same page with me. With regard to development, and we've seen examples of it, where before we have any, before the town has any options under site plan control or site plan agreements, developers want to go in and clear the land. And we have seen examples of that in recent, and there is the potential for another big one, depending on what happens with the Gallipo development. And so I feel pretty strongly about a site alteration bylaw to stop as everybody has said, it takes a long time to get mature trees, and they add to our way of life. And I really think that the council should consider adopting a site alteration bylaw. I'm not sure what the mechanics of it would be for going out, or how that would work, and I'm sure you can advise once you've brought something like that forward to the table. But I for now and for the foreseeable future, I think that's the way that we guard our existing canopy and our existing urban forest, is to preserve as many of those as we can, particularly in the new developments where we have some more options to mandate what happens on the land that's being developed. And the second thing I would say is that I know that we're speaking of forming another committee, and I'm just wondering whether we shouldn't perhaps consider asking REAL to act as that committee. REAL is and always has been since its inception here, very knowledgeable, very committed, and they are vested in our community very much. So I would like to suggest that that we not form a committee, but that we give that work or ask that work, if that work could be done, if they would be interested in taking that on as part of their activities with regard to the environmental work they already do.
Carol, did you have a comment or no? Go ahead.
Sorry, thanks. Thank you, Councillor Alfred. I sit on the REAL board, and I can take that forward as a suggestion to them. I'll leave it open-ended with them. I know that they do have lots of knowledgeable expertise in greening communities, particularly in the depaving movement right now. But that said, it is a limited group of volunteers, and I'll leave it up to them whether or not this fits their priorities, their strategic priorities as part of their action plan for the next couple of years. But I will certainly advise them of the suggestion and get their feedback and bring it back to council.
Thank you for that, Councillor Dwyer. That's good. I agree with you too. They're a small group, and they work very, very hard already on all the things they're doing. So I think to make them a committee would be, I think, a lot to ask. But I think they would be an excellent resource, and I'm sure many of them would like to sit on a committee if we have one. I would just like to add one thing. When I started as a councillor, we had an arborist. I can't remember her name. She was a very nice young woman who went on to another job somewhere else. But as an arborist, I used to have conversations with her in the park, and I don't know, but I don't think we have anyone right now. But as moving forward, I'm thinking that would be a staff resource that would be so welcome in our community, especially for this committee, and for advice on trees and other things. I did go on a walking tour with Craig Sinclair, who has made trees his passion and has so much information about it. And one of the things he pointed out in my neighborhood are the old maple trees should have been pruned at a certain age. And if they had been, our canopy would be 3 times the size. And so those are the kinds of things that most people that buy a house don't know about. And I think having an advisory committee or a group of people who make this, like Craig, their passion would be a really useful thing. But I support this very much, Planner Grinke. I think it's very well done, and it's something that we very much need, and I think will be welcomed by our whole community. In terms of trees being where they're needed, for the last many, many years, I've heard from families, especially with young children, that we need more shade in Lower Reach in our parks. And so I hope that that can be something that we do as well. So if there's no other comments, I will thank Planner Grinke for this. Excellent, and I look forward to it coming forward for final review. Thank you. Okay, that is priority issues, and we have a in-camera now that I would take a motion to move into in-camera. Councillor Brendan, seconded by Councillor Dwyer. All in favor? Okay, we will be moving into camera when Welcome back, everyone. We had an in-camera session and a rise and report as council was given direction on a contractual issue. Thank you for your patience. And unless there's any other item that council has, we will take a motion for adjournment. Seeing none, motion by Councillor Alford, seconded by Councillor Brennan. All in favor? We will adjourn, and Mayor Panko, what do you think? 5 minutes? 5 minutes. So in 5 minutes,
Thank you. Welcome to this meeting of Smith Falls Town Council for Monday, January 25th. We've got a very brief agenda tonight, but a very important one. I only got one announcement, just primarily to our business community. We set up a Zoom for tomorrow evening at 5:30 for myself and our manager of economic development to meet with our business community to gain some understanding and get some feedback on the impact of COVID on business operations in our community. And to be able to take back to the province the concerns and the feedback that we're able to achieve from our business owners. Understanding the lockdown is very challenging, understanding that a lot of protocols and measures are in place, and understanding that even though there are provincial and federal programs, there may be gaps in those programs that are limiting our business owners' ability to get funding through those programs. So I have a meeting, we have a meeting Thursday afternoon with Minister Pradmeet Sarkaria, who is the Minister of Red Tape Reduction, Small Business Red Tape Reduction. So we want to gain some understanding. So if you have not yet signed up and you're interested in signing up, please email Jennifer Miller, that's jmiller@smithsfalls.ca. She will send you the Zoom protocols for tomorrow night. That's it for my announcements. I'll ask for disclosure of monetary interest. I hear none. We have no delegations, no adoption of minutes. Any reports this evening? I see no. Oh, yes, Councillor McKenna.
Thank you, Worship. I attended, as part of my duty, the Public Health Board meeting last week, and I wanted to get back to Council. Public Health was carrying a significant deficit because of COVID, and the province had been promising to come through with some relief. It's interesting to note that any deficit a public health unit accumulates or ends the year with, it's the municipalities that actually pick up the tab for that. They're obligated. It's not the province. So we were watching that one very carefully, but the good news is the province of Ontario did come through and has come through with relief money and covered off that risk. So that's very good news, and the health unit will finish the year on probably a break-even point.
Great, thank you for that update. And Ashley, Councillor McKenna, back to you for our only bylaw this evening.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Alford, a bylaw to adopt estimates of the sums required for municipal purposes for the year 2021. This is the first and second reading only, and the third reading will take place on February 1st. So it's a bylaw to adopt estimates for the sums required for municipal purposes for the year 2021 be read a first time and taken as read a second time.
Thank you, and I'll just ask for some discussion before I call the question.
Yes, Your Worship, this is actually pretty close to the final budget for the 2021 year. We will take a week pause to put the third reading in place, but there has been a very robust engagement and discussion on the budget for a few months now, led by Janet Koziel, has done a terrific job with this, and staff adjusting to Council's feedback. Council's been engaged. We've had good feedback from the public, and we're very pleased and proud to put this budget forward for first and second reading tonight.
Thank you. Any other further comments from members of council? Okay, I will call the question. Moved by Councillor McKenna, second by Councillor Alford. The bylaw to adopt estimates of the sums required for municipal purposes for the year 2021 be read a first time and taken as read a second time. All in favor? That's carried. Thank you. We have no miscellaneous motions, inquiries and announcements. I think we're going to go to Councillor Allen for our traditional video conferencing, COVID-related, not COVID-related, for a trivia question tonight.
Yes. At one time, there was a large hockey player fixture attached to the Russell Hotel, now where the drugstore is. What team uniform did that statue have on? Who was he, and why in the world was he there?
Dan Cowley. Don't know what kind of uniform he had on.
Boston Bruins.
Boston Bruins. And What was the connection?
The Cowleys
He owned
owned
the
the
place.
Russell Hotel.
He
owned
owned
the
it,
place.
that's right. He owned the Russell Hotel at that time, and yes, and that's right from Valerie Hudson's Our Town, so
Yeah.
well done.
And he owned Don Cherries in Canada for
Yes, that's
many,
right.
many years
Yes.
as well. Yeah.
Well, his son. Did Dan
Yes.
Senior?
Dan,
It was Dan Junior that owned.
Dan Jr., yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Allen. Who's got the next trivia?
Whose
Any
turn is it?
volunteers?
McGuire.
Oh, McGuire. Good.
Okay, Councillor McGuire.
McGuire, have you done one yet? I don't think you have.
He
Yeah,
thinks
I
if he's
forget.
just quiet, we won't
We
notice.
We want, make sure it's watershed related, okay? I might have a chance of. Okay, water management. Motion, adjournment. I need a motion for adjournment. Who's got adjournment?
Dwyer.
Do we have it? Do we get it?
Councillor Dwyer. Oh, can I say Councillor Dwyer?
Designate, okay. Councillor Dwyer, please.
Sorry. Got multiple screens going. Okay. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Alfred, that this council adjourn its proceedings at 7:28 and stand so adjourned until the next duly called meeting of council.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Dwyer, said by Councillor Alford. This council adjourns proceedings at 7:28 p.m. and stands so adjourned to the next duly called meeting of council. All in favor? We stand adjourned. Have a good night.